What's up? What's up? Happy Monday morning. It is January 9th, 2023. Trusty 8 podcast on live. Shared this out for the last few days. A call to theists. This is an open room, but I'm asking theists to join. There's a link in the side chat. We'll pin it. Yeah, so I am an atheist. Peace and respect, Richard. Good to see you. And I'm calling for any theists who come in and simply ask questions or to try to convince me that God exists. Why is there a necessity for God, whether philosophically or otherwise? Nicodemus, good morning. So I remain unconvinced of this proposition. So bring it. Bring your arguments. It's not a debate me bro show, but I am going to start from square one. Why does the universe, or why do humans, how do I phrase this? What is the necessity for God, right? Is God necessary? And if so, why? It's the question I guess I'm framing here. But it's an open room. Once again, asking theists to come in. We'll have the open room for both theists and atheists next week, next Monday. We can have an all-out war. No, an all-out war. A war of ideas. And if nobody comes in, then I'll just, I don't know, sit here and twiddle my thumbs for an hour. But yeah, it's very much an open room. I don't have a whole lot of propositions. Like I said, to start from, I would have to be convinced of why there would be a necessity for God. And I'm just not there yet. B.S. Lewis. Hopefully. You got Richard in the back. How you doing, Richard?
Peace and respect. I'm doing better than I deserve. How is you?
Peace and respect, Richard. I'm doing very well. A little bit tired. I was up kind of past my bedtime last night, but that's all right.
What'd you do that for?
What's up? Look at the trees. Oh, I was actually busy watching a bunch of streams, and I was watching Presup stream. I didn't see where you were in there though. I guess he was going on for a
Yeah,
while.
yeah. Sometimes I'll truly lurk and not even say that I'm there and just watch a little bit of stuff, trying to get an idea where their brains are at. Like right now, I've got something that's playing, and I'm giving somebody else a view over there at what's the name of his show? Um, Ryan Apologetics. I'm giving him a watch, even though I'm not listening. And much rather talk to you, actually.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you coming by.
I'm doing exactly as well as Richard deserves. B.S. Lewis, I would never curse anyone with what I deserve, man. like you don't even know what kind of jerk I used to be. And I mean, I've been with me my whole life, and trust me, I was terrible. All right. So what you said, it's something like, why is there a necessity for a God? Something like that. Is that right?
Right. You kind of hear that from the presuppositionalists, I guess, is why I'm framing it that way. I mean, because
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
they would say something like, well, like if you reference the God, then the God must exist, or um, admits of the necessity, right? Like, I don't know if I'm quite phrasing that correctly, but that's something of the presuppositional argument.
Well, you labeled it a presupposition, and maybe some people, and I think by the way you used it, I'm not saying you don't understand what a presup is, but just generally for anyone who may not have heard that term before, To presuppose a thing is to say that it's necessary in reality, but we can't show it does exist or is true. It's just it logically follows that that thing has to be. So I might say something like, I have a Yeti coffee thermos in my hand. I bought it at a store, but that store does not produce coffee thermoses, right? So in order that I had that was at a store, I have to say things like, there's a manufacturer who, manipulates steel and plastic and create these things. Then there's a truck, and the truck ships it, and there's a person driving the truck, and there's fueling stations and blah 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 blah, all this different stuff to get to coffee cup, right? So I can't right now prove that that there is manufacturer of this coffee cup, but I can safely assume, since I have coffee cup, there is a manufacturer, right? And that's what they're doing. But is it necessarily true that the universe was created like a coffee cup is created? Well, no, that part's a huge assumption, and it's not axiomatic, because you do not have to assume it.
Right. And then so we can explain all of those minutia by human intervention, right? Like,
For the coffee cup, yeah.
right, for the coffee cup. And we can't, so to say, like, I guess that's like the argument from complexity, right? That you would say that, well, something as
Sure.
complex as a human had to have been designed, like a watchmaker argument, right?
Yeah, that's what they say.
Whereas, like, coffee cups really aren't that complex, but they do nonetheless have to be designed by some manufacturer. So it's kind of a strange paradox that we have such a complex human anatomy and stuff like that, but we could say, well, these things, that arise in nature. Say, let's even say, just the fact that we all require water, and water is relatively abundant in nature, right?
Sure.
And this mere fact, it's like, there's another argument. I can't recall what it is, but it's like, if you were the water, and you were like a puddle, sitting in a hole, and you'd say, wow, this hole appears to be designed especially for me, right?
Right.
It's the perfect size to fit this this amount of liquid or whatever.
Right.
Is that kind of, I mean, it seems like a post hoc rationalization, right? Both of those would be,
Yeah, that's what the puddle example is pointing out. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So there's things of greater and lesser complexity, but we can see in, okay. Let's do a super simple example. There's dust in outer space, but every particle of dust has mass, which means it's pulling toward every other particle everywhere. So it makes perfect sense that eventually any nebula is going to become a solid mass, or several solid masses, right? And that's not the power of God. It's just mass is attracted to other mass. It's just as simple as that. So it doesn't take a God to create a planet, you see, or just a big glob of whatever. And you could look at that and say, well, wow, look at all these different materials, and the like in Shannon information complexity of this glob of stuff that was a nebula. Well, that doesn't make it created. And in the same way, we can see that hydraulics and Brownian gas laws and all these sorts of things, and the 22 cosmological constants will cause things. It's just by their nature and what they are. They will cause things. So do we need a creator of the universe that we would call a God? I don't see a need for that.
Interesting. Well, I want to say, take a moment to say hello to our dying son. See you in the side chat. Good to see you.
That's a great name. It's an
Yes.
amazing name.
Okay, well, so to shift gears on this a little bit there, then okay, if there's no necessity for God, why
Sure.
why would one believe in God? Or I guess
Well, you mentioned physicality and how that applies to the whole universe in the in the argument from design, and also the argument from complexity, or the 22 cosmological constants. Those aren't the only reasons why there would be or should be a God, and in fact, I think are not the justifications for what the God is. The God that I see being described is a set of moral constructs which are specifically applicable to human being and human being alone and wouldn't apply anywhere else. They're moral dictums, and we're a moral animal. If I said something like, I once saw on safari a lion murder a gazelle, my statement is flawed, because I can't say a lion murdered a gazelle. I can say it violently killed it and ate it while it was, and some of it ate of it was while the animal was still alive. And maybe to a child that's a horrific thing to see, but I can't say it's an immoral act because the lion has no morals,
well,
whereas we do. Go ahead.
why would we not say that a human being in a slaughterhouse is committing murder anytime he kills a
You could.
cow or a pig for food source?
You could.
You,
In fact, some people can't do it. They feel emotionally repulsed by it, like they are murdering, in which case they are. Yeah,
uh,
nothing wrong with that.
but almost every religion has a prescriptive some code for how this should be done, but they don't. With the exception of maybe a couple of religions I could think of, like Jainism or something, which is more of a smaller
Yeah.
set of beliefs. But most religions actually allow for this practice.
Sure. Sure. That's because they don't have the consciousness level that we have. And we judge independence and respect based on consciousness levels. And the only exception we make to that is when a human is severely deformed, mentally, physically, and then we go, oh well, that's the exception. We shouldn't kill it. It's very tribal, It's hard to justify. But the description I see well, because I'm in a Christian community, not that I think the Bible is the only valid religion, or describing the validity of religion itself, but just because I'm in a Christian society, I refer most to the Bible, where the Bible is describing that God is a set of constructs, a set of guidelines for running a human society, but it would only apply to a human society and nothing else anywhere else. Like, how can I say God is love, and love is an emotion, and that emotion is in some way in charge of non-emotional animals? You see, it falls apart as soon as you say he's the God of lions. No, he's not.
Okay, but wait, it does say that in the Bible specifically, though. I don't know how that meshes with like the Quran and stuff like that, but it does say
Very
that
well.
God created all living things, both man
No,
and other animals.
no, it doesn't. It says repurposed. It doesn't say created. That's a translation and not the original idea.
Okay, so you see that these things were already here. God reformed man.
Yeah, yeah. Let me make an argument for. And by the way, that God right there is actually Elohim and not Yahweh.
Right.
And the word Elohim it means powerful beings, but they could be evil or good powerful beings depending on what they're doing. So it doesn't even say that Yahweh reformed man. It says that powerful beings changed existent stuff into man, if you can dig that, which we see happened in the evolutionary cycle. We see that did happen, that we came from something else. And I have no problem with that. What was the other thing you said? My brain did something and then I lost it. I skipped tracks on the record.
Well, okay, as far as reforming or repurposing man, but there he also includes land animals. I think is the word they use, or something like that.
Well, yeah, that's fine. But what it reads is that these things existed in the heavens, or heaven spaceships, that they existed there and then were put here. And then later on, although that story is very brief, it goes into detail about them escaping their oppressors and finding freedom. But in order to do that, they had to steal from their oppressors. So they take everything, plants and animals, and they take it with them. When the Christians talk about the Exodus at a small scale, thinking it's like maybe 3 million Jews in the ancient Near East, that's really not taking the story to its full completion. And it doesn't say, they never talk about, like, how did these people going out into the Sinai desert where they were probably going to die anyway, how did they carry like trees and plants and and pots and keep watering the stuff? It's really not what the story is about, but it's talking about the first humans ever in the universe escaping a planet and striking out on their own, and how hard that was. And of course it would be hard, but they take everything, they stole it, and then those stolen objects, samplings of those stolen objects are put here to change the earth. And I can make I think a necessary argument. It logically follows that this planet, the rock itself, is much, much older than the life on it, and in fact older than the oceans and the atmosphere. And here's where the Bible necessarily says that. Like, if I said, hey, Kev, my lack of car has a flat tire and it's out of gas, that doesn't make any sense, because I don't have a car to start with. So you can't put descriptors on a non-existent thing, right? You can't start describing the conditions of a non-existent thing. That doesn't even make sense. But what the text says is that the earth was formless and void. Those are descriptors of an existent thing necessarily. So I looked up formless and void, and what that means is, formless there means without area distinctions. Like, there weren't places that were wet or compared to other places, or hot compared to other places, or it was all just the same everywhere. And I looked up the word void, and it means void of life forms. So it's saying the existent earth didn't have any area distinctions on it, and there was no living things. But those are descriptors of an existent place. There's no such thing as descriptors of a non-existent thing.
Well, I would say you could describe a potentially, well, okay. There's a concept, right? You could have a concept of a thing. You could have a description of that thing, and it may or may not exist, right? If it's merely conceptual, you don't have firsthand knowledge of it. But say I were to describe a person, I don't know
Okay.
whether or not this person exists, but I could give you, they're 5'7", female, blonde. That's kind of a vagary. And if you're just saying, well, the Earth was just kind of a rock, but somebody had to put all the water and the plants and the animals here and transport them from another place, that's a pretty specific idea. So
Yeah.
why is it that there's this kind of historical, like primitivist view of the Bible then, where it's not things being transported here? That's not what most people get from the Genesis story, right? Like, why do you
Well,
think that most people have a
actually,
different view?
that's a presentism fallacy. That's a fairly recent idea. Even in Christianity, that's a fairly recent idea. And certainly in traditional Judaism, that idea never existed. In fact, in early Christianity, that idea never existed. But I think what has happened is, it used to be okay for you to be a devotee of some certain God, right? And that God did not have to own everything everywhere and to have done everything. That was not even thought of that way. And I think it's kids on the playground, those kids representing religions, where they go, no, my dad's bigger than your dad because he can lift up a whole truck. Dude, these things have gotten ridiculous, and it's not necessary in the story. In fact, it can't be maintained in the story.
Interesting. Hello, Doc Fearsome. Good to see you back there.
Peace and respect, Doc.
I remember, this is shifting gears a little bit. I remember being that kid on the playground, even though I wasn't deeply religious as a kid, I had a deep aversion to blasphemy. And when kids would say, "God damn," I would freak out. Or if they would say
Aw.
any other type of, I had this deep aversion to blasphemy, and I would always come after them. Say, "You don't say that. Don't take the name in vain. Don't take the Lord's name in vain." Why do you think that's such a deep? Do you think God would really care if people blasphemed or took His name in vain?
Yeah, he's God.
All powerful.
God as a person is super insecure, and just everything offends him. Yeah, those are modern developments in religion. I troubled myself, as I usually do, to go back and look at the original ideas and the meanings, and try to take into consideration the culture that religion was given to. And to blaspheme the Holy Ghost actually means, it's kind of twofold. If you're like always declaring stuff like that, but you don't really believe it, and you're just being a plastic person wearing a mask, that's one form of blasphemy, right? And like, you could say something like, if Joel Osteen doesn't really believe the Bible, he's a blasphemer. And the other way is to completely deny something when it's obvious and in your face. Like if you sat here and told me, I don't own a computer, I don't even own a modern phone. In fact, I'm just magically on the internet right now because I have these magical internet powers. That's denial of the reality at hand, and you got some issues, And that's the other form of blasphemy, is that in end times, when heaven and angels and all this stuff is like physically obvious and you're interacting with them, and you go, nope, that's not heaven, nope, those aren't angels, nope, that's not the Holy Ghost, nope, that's not God. That level of denial, that's the second kind of blasphemy, and the more important one.
So wait, if Elon Musk is able to manufacture a microchip and put it in your head, you're able to surf the internet through the medium this microchip,
Sure.
purely through a mental process. Does that make
Right.
Elon Musk the god of the internet?
Sure, why not?
All right. Okay, so walking it way back, because I don't want to get... So all of this means that... so your conception of God is going to be different from many people's conception of God, right? But you're not... In your view, you're not describing a creator God who is all-knowing, all-seeing, omnipotent, omniscient, all that, right? Is this a very different
I'm not
type
into
of
this
God?
I'm not into this new agey bullshit like most Christians are. I actually think that the text is valid and should be taken seriously.
So you would call yourself a biblical literalist, right?
And traditionalist, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, all these modern ideas. And I know you do know this. I'm not actually asking if you know. I'm recalling to you. When Big Bang Theory came out, Christians like freaked. They're like, "Oh yes, finally!" All right, we're gonna glom onto this and use it in every way possible, straw manning it constantly, and misrepresenting it in some pseudoscience kind of way to show that our God exists. Like, what the hell are you doing with it, dude? It's a scientific theory that defeats your ideas about God. And the Christians flip-flopped on that and went, "Yep, see? Dude, that's not what it's describing." And it doesn't work that way. And they'll just glom onto any new discovery and go, "Yep, we knew that the whole time."
I think there was a period between when Big Bang cosmology became popularized and when we had radiometric dating methods, right? So up until then, they were like, well, it could have been 6,000 years. You know what I mean? And they were like, no,
Yeah.
definitely couldn't have been 6,000 years, right? Because
Right.
now we have more sophisticated methods of dating and stuff like that. So,
Right. Yeah, and they'll flip flop every new bit of science. They're going to flip over, and they're going to try to make that support their view. And B.S. Lewis, no offense taken. You're absolutely right. The only problem is that I can't show the future because it hasn't happened. So I'm kind of stuck at saying you have to wait. And and I think it's fine for you to say I need physical evidence to believe a thing. Nothing wrong with that. I just think it's part of the story that you'll actually get it.
and
Oh,
to address look at the trees there, why do you think the Bible should be taken seriously? What do you believe is valid?
it's only serious and valid and important when you start to experience the things that are in the prophecy. And until then, a person is free to think whatever they want, and that's fine. Now, me, I'm not an empiricist alone. I am an empiricist, but I'm not only an empiricist. I also believe that there's philosophy. I also believe there are inductive and deductive arguments. I think deductive and inductive arguments, depending on them being valid and sound, are evidential. That is proof of a thing. So when I say that the Bible is real, well, when it's talking about physical things that are real, we have physical evidence to that. When it's talking about deductive arguments that necessarily follow from what we do know is physical and real, we can say that is necessary also. And in inductive arguments, if it's the best explanation for a thing, then that's most likely the answer, even in things that we don't have evidence for. Like, for instance, I can make an inductive argument that some person acts like they care about me. They like ask me how I feel, and they try to adjust themselves to how I feel. And I see these immaterial evidences of them, and I might conclude that they love me. Well, I can't prove they love me, but it sure looks like they do, and that's probably the best explanation, since I'm not a multimillionaire, with a bank card that I could hand them. It's probably just that they love me.
Well, love would be a purely subjective experience, though. I mean,
Sure.
that's one thing we could say, that people experience emotional states differently. So what we all describe
Sure.
as love, one person might see love entirely differently than another.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
um,
But that's why it's an inductive argument. But would you say that because love it can only be formed as an inductive argument, that there is no love?
no, I mean, I would say there is love,
Okay.
but the fact that people have different conceptions of love means you have to kind of get to a more objective basis for what the standard of that is. So you could be like, well, if I'm in love with a person, if I'm involved with a person, like, like that's a deeper sense of like a romantic sense of love, then I would have expectations of that person. And it would be unreasonable of me to hold those expectations without voicing them, without vocalizing the expectation to that person and getting a reciprocation, a response for that, right? Oh, yes,
Yeah, but if you don't mind me going back, since you brought up look at the trees comment, and I never actually got to the point of what I was trying to say. Is that
sorry, yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
No, no. I love your brain. It likes to move on. Mine does too, but I don't want to be disrespectful to anyone. So, okay, I can show you things in the Bible that are true in reality. They are true in reality. And it's valid in that way because all true things are valid in reality. That's what makes them true, is that the reality exists. So I can say something like, and this is kind of a long story, I apologize, Kevin. I can say that in an overview of the story of Exodus, it's true that when you don't know something, say biology or whatever, right? But you grew up in this society, you're an adult, you heard things about biology, and you have some wrong ideas, just like I do right now, I'm sure. Have wrong ideas about biology because I'm not, trained in the college for that kind of thing. So when I don't know it, I am limited because I literally don't know it. And I am separated from those who do know it. So within my realm of the cosmos, my ideas of reality, I am limited and separated concerning biology. But I can hear about biology and go, that's interesting. I'd like to really learn that. So I can accept a guide. That guide can bring me through the wall that separates me between me and college. We can get funding and grants and whatever like that, and I can start going to college if my grades are good enough. And that guide brings me into college. Well, when I think that I know something about biology, I'm sitting in that class and I'm thinking about the ways that I have thought about it. That's when I'm actually, I think I'm in light. I think I have knowledge, right? But that's when I'm following false ideas. On the flip side of that, when I realize that I don't know shit and I accept what the college professor says, that's when I realize I'm in darkness and I accept the fire that will lead me forward. And as I go through that process, I'm following in darkness a pillar of flame. I'm following in what I think is light, a pillar of smoke, or false things that only hurt you. And I struggle and I go on and on and on. And sometimes people in college will actually give up. They'll go, look, I was better off before I started this. It's harder than I thought it was going to be. And they complain to the guide and the college counselor, whatever they call that. He'll go, look, let me throw you a little carrot, a little bone here. I did it. It was tough for me too. You'll get through it. You're smart enough. You're good enough. You've got good funding. It's going to be fine. Just hang in there. Here, have a quail. Have some manna. You'll be okay. And then you present your final arguments or your testing. In the case of like a doctorate, it's like that big paper they write that has to be reviewed. So they present their final arguments. And that's literally the word media, to make an argument or present your case. That's media, which is why the people are slaves and limited in, that's the word Egypt right there, and the word Pharaoh means divider. So he represents that you are divided in your world from this other classification. And then you accept this guide. They call him Moses, the one who gives you the rest. Moses rest? Nope, that's Noah. Confused two words. Never mind what his name means. And he gets you through this impasse. They call that the Sea of Reeds. It's something that humans can't walk through by themselves. And he clears a path, and you walk through dry-footed, and you start college, but you're in the desert of agony, and you're discordant, which is what those actual words in the Bible mean, is discordant and agonizing. And it's not called the Sinai Desert, even though it is the Sinai Desert. But you struggle through, and you make your final arguments, and you graduate. You come to the land of promise, the promised thing. So what I'm saying is the story of Exodus is true. Like, that's real. Is it a history lesson talking about 3 million Jews crossing the Sinai? No, not at all.
All right. So, okay, I guess to look at the trees comment, we're calling it in the side chat. I can show you things in the Spider-Man comics that are true. Yes, Liz,
Yes.
but that is Spider-Man fallacy, right? Just because there are things in the books, there are elements that are true, doesn't mean that it's not a work of fiction. I could point to many works of fiction that contain elements of truth, but I can say this book is a fiction, right?
But it is a fiction. It's not a historical document, and that's not the point. It is overall of the past of this earth a fiction, but it's trying to tell us deep and meaningful truths, and that's the point.
So it's more of the. I always get this confused. It's not a metaphor. It's a allegory, allegorical.
Yeah, I think the Christians look at it as historical to allegorical. I look at it as allegorical to predictive.
Right.
So I actually think they're looking at it kind of upside down because they think it has to be history when it's obviously not. I mean, there's entire towns and people and places that are made up whole cloth. They don't exist. They never did.
What do you think about B.S. Lewis's comment here? The pillars of fire and Hevel, is that Hevel, are about motivation and directly correlate to the concepts of heaven and hell.
Pillars of fire and smoke
Smoke.
in the story of Exodus. I don't know what the word Havel means or Hebel.
Hevel.
I don't know what that means. It could mean smoke. I don't know. Are about motivation and directly correlate to the concepts of heaven and hell. I have to agree with BS on that. In that, we can right now be miserable or happy depending on how much reality we accept. Like a person who just obviously is denying reality all the time is maladjusted and they need someone to take care of them. We call them crazy people. You know? And the more accepting of reality you are, the better adjusted you are to the actuality and the more successful you are, and we call you sane. You know?
Yeah, and going back to what you were kind of making an analogy to the college professor earlier, and I was
Sure.
that made me think of it because with crazy people, it's crazy people are only or insane people are only insane with the correlation to sanity, right? If most
Right.
people were not sane, then a sane person would be the insane one. I guess so there's
True.
a method of standardization that we're like, oh, this is normal behavior and this is outside of normal behavior, right? Um, if
But
somebody
also the reality that we have no choice about adds into that. It's not just our opinions. I mean, I would say it's crazy, at least in the moment, when a person thinks they take enough drugs, they can walk off the edge of a building and start flying. They'll just be able to walk on the air. Now their brain thinks that's true, but gravity will take over and they're going to plummet, you know? So it's not just our opinion. There's an actuality that affects our reality that we have no opinions about. Your opinion doesn't matter.
Okay, so a bit of a shift now. In what you just said triggered something I was thinking earlier. When you're talking about forces like gravity, physical forces, what causes the physical force, or is God involved in that? Or in other words, why would some apologists say, well, you can't have it, gravity proves God because you can't have a force like gravity without a creator.
Yeah, okay. Gravity is a fundamental force that we haven't figured out how to test what that fundamental force is, and that's what it is. It's just like strong or weak nuclear force. It's those kinds of things, and gravity is one of those kinds of things. And it doesn't need a creator. All it needs is energy in that's traveling. That's all you need is energy traveling, and that just naturally happens. And I'm you could call me a steady state universist. I think the universe always has been and always will be. And I think the idea of the Big Bang may be true, but it also may be local. It might be a small pocket of outer space that we see expanding. Because we already know that we can't see all of outer space because there's this wall they call the cosmic microwave background radiation. And we can't see past the wall. And we don't know what's out there. Which is why you'll have terms like knowable universe and then universe, which are not the same thing. We can only see so much of it. Well, if you can only see so much of it, how big is it? Well, we have no idea. Are we looking at 50% of the universe or 1/1 billionth of the universe? Which is it? And even if it was 50% of the universe, is that a good sample? I don't think 50% is a good sample of something. And if it's 1/1 billionth of the universe, it's definitely not a good sample. So, yeah, we see expansion and we see redshift and We see the cosmic microwave background radiation, and that's all fine. What if that's not everywhere? And we can't tell.
So do you think we could potentially live inside of a multiverse?
No, I don't even think the idea of a multiverse is necessary. It's just that we're in a stage of our evolution in science. Like, okay, people used to think we lived in a dome. We've expanded that dome out. We call it the knowable universe. It's just another dome. It's not the truth. It's just what we can perceive from where we are right now. And later, we would perceive more, and we would say, well, that's not that knowable universe thing was a fallacy.
Okay, I just have to clarify, just for anyone, I'm sure everyone in the side chat knows, but Richard is not a flat earther. The dome was just a. It made me think.
Yeah. Well, I said it's fallacious. The dome was fallacious. Now we have the knowable universe. I think that's fallacious. It's making too many assumptions.
Okay. All right. Wait. So that kind of maybe gave me a giggle. All right. Wait. So then why is it? Do you think God requires my belief? Does it? Why is it necessary for my existence that I believe in this deity that came and reformed me? Or is this just like more knowledge I might attain?
Okay. So there's a little bit of a Christian assumption in there that I think you should drop. That this God thing creates stuff of its own will and power. And part of what it creates is what we experience, and we're dependent on that stuff that it created. Okay? I don't think that claim is anywhere in any story. Okay? And that Christians have blown up what is essentially terraforming of one planet into the creation of all things in all places. And I don't think that should be assumed. I know I can't justify that idea. But instead, what the Bible is describing, and other places too, is the human animal is a very certain animal. And it creates or necessitates in its nature certain things in reality. Like if an animal were non-emotional, right? It doesn't need emotional dictums. It doesn't need the emotional rules. It doesn't need morality because it's an amoral animal. But we're moral animals. So we have no choice that we need certain things, which is why a society of two people will lay down moral laws. When we have a serious adult personal relationship with someone, they'll start setting down moral law. They have to. There's really no option there. Even if the moral law is we're not going to have moral laws, that in itself is a moral law. So, because what the human animal is, we need wisdom, knowledge, counsel, understanding, fear, power, and conservation. We need those things. So it's not God making us, it's the animal that naturally occurred necessitates this God. That's what's being described in the Bible, and why there is no Yahweh until there is Adam. Look at the words. There is no Jehovah until Adam. You have to have Adam first. Everything before that is Elohim, which just means powerful beings. It doesn't even mean our God.
So my primary criticism here, I agree with B.S. Lewis. I think that animals do demonstrate morality on varying levels, and
Sure.
overall, there seems to be a system of checks and balances that occurs naturally amongst all living organisms. In order for them to exist, they must cooperate in one sense or another, or a species will go extinct, right? And
Sure, absolutely. I believe in social evolution.
So that kind of does contradict, though, the moral animal as far as humans go. I mean, how far does that extend? If we were
It
to,
doesn't. It's not an argument. It's just you just said there's other moral animals. That's fine. And they have their kind of morality, and that's in their species, and they all agree on it in some way.
so those animals may adhere to a different god. They may have a different creator because
Yeah.
in the group of
No,
Elohim,
not a
right? That
different
might be a
creator. They were created by a naturalistic, Darwinistic kind of evolutionary process, just like everything else was created that way. But they would have their own ideas about what is the highest thing. Like some animals are like non-emotional, purely instinctual. And they will attack not even considering whether or not they might die if something invades the, I don't know, beehive, whatever. And they're not really having a thought, and they don't have those kinds of feelings at that level. But then you've got like things like porpoises, right? And they are emotional, and dogs and stuff, and they do obviously have these, like this moral landscape within their group, you know and their group is the highest thing, like a wolf pack. The pack is the highest thing. No dog in the pack is the highest thing, you know so yeah, I agree with that, but it doesn't make the god of human being the same exact thing as the god of wolf pack. It's different in some ways, it seems to me.
well, yeah. Human social hierarchy functions fundamentally differently from a wolf pack, right? Because human social hierarchy tends to value the elder, which may stem from religion. I don't know, but it seems that we value old age, whereas in a wolf pack, as soon as you get too old to fight, you're done, right? If you're the alpha male, you're getting overthrown, like, and so there's much more of a kind of a functional aspect to it, whereas we value knowledge above agility in some ways, right?
Yeah, I think yeah, some kind of like experience over top of physical prowess, something like that maybe.
Right.
But then we have language, so that kind of makes sense. We can translate to each other highly complex ideas, and in fact, acceptance of reality through explanations and complex ideas is more valuable than physical strength. I think it really is.
But I think we can also demonstrate that specifically wolves, various animals like whales, have languages. We
Yeah,
don't quite know how to interpret them, but we can say there's um, some continuity,
sure.
something that is a constant in the languages these animals use with each other.
Sure.
So
But what I'm saying is, if you ask a whale, if you could interpret their language and you can understand what they're saying, they might have ideas that they translate through, to each other, about the importance of things, and they might have expression that means, hey, this is really important what I'm saying right now. So maybe they do have a hierarchy of ideas. It's hard for us to say right now, but I think that even if we could translate their language and see the hierarchy of ideas, they don't necessarily hold something that they call God. I don't know. I can only say we do.
so this concept you think is uniquely human, which was going to go back to
Well, I
my
don't know that. I
the
don't know
question I
that
was
because
going to
I don't
ask
know everything that
earlier.
exists.
If you believe that we are evolved primates, right, or
Yeah.
apes, that then why or could or should we teach these concepts to primates, right? Can we would other primates be able to grasp these concepts
I
over a
don't know
given
that they
period of
would
time?
care or that they would apply. It depends on the primate, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean we could teach chimps sign language, right? Stuff like that. Um,
We have. Yeah.
so it's only a step further to introduce the concept of God, but would that be something that we ought to do?
I'm not sure it applies to them. I mean, what was it? Coco was a female gorilla and was really good at sign language and expressed things like Coco had a pet cat. And when Coco was away from the cat, Coco would talk about the cat and how it missed the cat and wanted to pet the cat and hold the cat. You know, so there's expressions there of emotional states that were uncued. Like they didn't encourage Coco to say that. Coco just said it. You know, which is pretty cool. But I'm not sure that Coco was ever at the level of awareness that we are, and having the same kind of awareness we have, that there should be some God of Coco. I'm not sure of that.
Well, what would it take to measure that? I mean,
I have no
would you be
idea.
satisfied with like some type of brain scan, like a neural scan or something, or would it take like
That's not.
verbal communication from the animal?
But Kev, you'll forgive me. This is all a great distraction. I'm only talking about what I only want to talk about what the human animal is, and what the human animal needs from a social environment and its physical environment. It's really all I'm interested in. We could hypothesize about animals' levels of consciousness for years, and we'd never get anywhere.
Well, right. I want to address Doc Fearsome here. I don't believe there are any alphas, at least not in humans. When we speak about alphas, there are two categories which we're talking about. Somebody who is dominant, either socially or biologically, in the sense of reproduction. Right? They're going to either get the most of the mating aspect of it, or the most social cohesion or social adherence, right? So that's what makes one an alpha, the leader of the pack, so to speak. That's all we're really talking about. But I don't think it means superior in any way, if that's what you mean.
So what I'm saying is that there seems to be in the side chat, not to single anyone out, but there seems to be this assumption that I think my God created man. No, that is a modern Christian way to look at it, and I'm an old-fashioned kind of guy. But what I think is true is what the philosophical Jew believes about the text, because it's obvious in the text without the presuppositions of Christianity that God is immaterial constructs that humans necessitate. That is, we are the God maker, in that in our nature as we evolved, there are certain things that we elevate in immaterial constructs which are greater than the physicality, because it's a set of social standards and a way to live together as a functional society that will move itself forward at hopefully the best, most progressive rate and in the most advantageous way. So it's literally nothing else but wisdom, knowledge, counsel, understanding, fear, power, and conservation, and all the repercussions of those things. Things like humanitarianism is God. Truth is God. Ideas like that. I don't see a claim anywhere that this God created us, but that it's a necessary part of us. That is, we need it. It is of us.
Yeah, and I think BS. You cleared it up. For you, creation is impossible, and it's your idea is not what we usually experience. So
I'm sorry.
it's far enough away from the conventional that we're still kind of mulling it over, but it doesn't because it doesn't sound like any conventional description of
But
Christianity
that's the
as
problem.
we.
It is the conventional description. All the rest of what we're talking about right now in these like religious YouTube channels and stuff, and these modern Christians, that stuff is brand new, and it's not justified anywhere. Like those are not the original ideas and claims. They just aren't.
So, do you think like conventional or Orthodox Judaism is closer to what a literal interpretation of the Bible would be? So, I've heard they're like
Sure, like,
atheistic but practicing Jews.
well, yeah, they could call themselves atheistic Jews compared to other religious folks, right? But they're not actually atheists because they believe that God is necessary and does exist. They just understand it's a philosophy set, which is why we call them philosophical Jews instead of religious Jews. But they're actually sticking to the original ideas without pouring all these other, coatings of modern ideas on top of it. Where that's what Christianity is all about, is adding another coat of gloss.
Um, Doc Fearsome, there are people who can dominate others, but people who are dominated or subordinate can throw off the dominance. And what you're talking about is the concept of revolution. And in a lot of ways, I could see how in the time and place that it happened, the at least the origins of the biblical tales, right? There was a political, a social revolution going on. It took it form in the shape of Christianity in a way, right? As told by the story, and I think it can be verified through Roman through the history of the Roman Empire and things like that. What do you think about that? Is there some significance to that?
Significance to what? Summate?
Whether or not there was a group of religious adherents, namely Christians, who were at first oppressed and then embraced by the Roman Empire, while
Oh.
the empire itself was fracturing, things like that.
I mean, I think the history happened as it actually happened, which is mostly not what the Bible is talking about, actual history. And I think that's important to like the human story and how we understand ourselves. But I don't think it's important to the story in the Bible in any way. And the Bible is trying to express the intent of a highly evolved, technologically advanced society and what they're going to do to the planet. They do that using memory hooks, because that's a great way to teach things. Things we already know about, and then you use that as an example of something that hasn't happened yet. Like, Mom sat me down and said, someday you're going to want to kiss somebody. And I'm like, yes, Mom, I like kissing you. And she's like, no, son, that's not what I meant. It's like that, but it's a different kind of kiss where there's other emotions involved that you haven't experienced yet, and it's going to be fine. I just want to let you know that happens. That's a memory hook. She's using the mom kiss to explain a girlfriend kiss, a lover kiss, right? So that's what the Bible is doing. But sometimes you can't make an example of an actual situation that people have actually had, and you just got to like make up a scenario that is like the other scenarios that did exist, which is why sometimes in the Bible, entire cities are made up out of nothing. They don't exist. The people in them didn't exist. But it's a usable example within that pretend universe, that can be used as to create a memory hook so that other things can be built upon it. And I think that's what the story is about. I don't think it's history at all.
All right. So why are so many people getting it wrong? Why do you get people like Answers in Genesis and Ken Ham and Kent Hovind and all these guys who want to, deny evolution? Like, what, what
Their pride?
is the? You call it pride?
It's probably their Christian pride, most of it. I mean, it's
Well, they
obviously
seem
not
to
the
feel
text.
they seem to feel they have a biblical foundation. Is that a purely translational issue, or is that a matter of interpretation?
Both, and other things piled on top of that too. Recent tradition, um, tribalism, biases. I mean, there's all kinds of things add into that. But I like to stay to the basics and say, well, this part's necessary, and those parts aren't. And the more basic and necessary I get, the more I find that's the way it was originally thought of.
Okay, so you think it requires further study, basically. These scholars have kind of just been...
No, they've gone too far.
Okay.
It takes less study. They've overdone it. We've just had too much time. And by the way, the Bible talks about this and how people would get really weird and overly complex for no apparent reason. And that's spoken of in the text too. It's written prophetically, like, oh, the people are going to do this, and it's going to cause problems. And that's why the hero of the story, the Jesus, why he's always saying, well, you have heard it said, but I say, or you have read, but I say, because he's correcting them. That's his whole job, is to fix it, right? So it becomes unnecessarily complex. It claims all kinds of things. The religion itself claims all kinds of things that aren't in the basis of the religion, the story of the religion. It's just not there. And that's predicted in the text too, saying, and there was a book in his right hand, and the book was sealed with 7 seals. And I wept, for no one was able to loose the seals thereof, nor to read of the scroll. And the angel said to me, fear not, for the Lamb is worthy, and the Lamb will loose the 7 seals of the great scroll. It's talking about how the Bible is locked up, and how Jesus comes at a certain time and he unlocks it for them. But when something is locked and it's a black box and you can't see in it, our natural, we want the answer. So what we're naturally going to do with that black box is start guessing what's in it.
Okay. So what do you make of a text like, if a man lays with another man, he should be stoned, right?
It's talking, well, first of all, you can't depend on a translation. You have to know the Hebrew idioms and what the word stone means. And if you assume what the word stone means is a rock, first of all, you're already wrong. And second of all, it's talking about memory. It's giving us memory hooks. To say homosexuality is only to say this is not middle of the road. This is an outlier thing. It's an unusual thing. That's all it means. But it actually goes over a great myriad of outlier things. Things that are unusual. And then it uses that thing to say this is unusual and it's a bad way of thinking. It's not even condemning homosexuality. And if you assume that stone means a rock that you're supposed to throw at somebody, you've got the wrong idea, because it defines what a stone is. A stone is something that has had no tool lifted upon it, no man has altered it, and it contains the Word of God. That's the biblical definition of a stone. Now, according to the Bible, there's only one thing which no hand can be lifted upon, which is solid and foundational. It can never be changed, and it has the Word of God written in it. It's the Bible. It's the Bible referring to itself as an unmovable stone. Now, if you're going to say something like the Bible's wrong and it's immoral to teach someone the Bible, fine, then it's immoral to stone someone. But if this story contains truths that they should hear, which would make them accept reality and not be an outlier in important ways, then you're not committing an immoral act by stoning an outlier.
Okay. So the stone is, again, it's not a prescription. Like, are the commandments a prescription of how one ought to act?
No, I think they're declarations of inability. I'll give you a for instance. Thou shalt not kill. is if the story is claiming, I mean, at least let me just say internal critique. Human beings are restored in heaven. When you're restored, you're not dead. Did you end a life? Did people die of old age, diseases, cancer, car accidents? No, they did not, because they're alive. Thou shalt not kill is a declaration of my inability. I don't have the power to permanently take away life. I can't do it.
Okay. Again, this is just, so it's not in the conventional sense what most people would think, and so I'm trying to. So, but you're saying that even if I were to kill somebody in the physical sense here, they could be resurrected on some other physical plane, or
Yeah, there's some
something
kind
like
of a physical thing that is described and labeled heaven. In fact, it says so in no uncertain terms several ways. I am not a God of the dead. I am a God of the living. The dead know nothing. I mean, this is atheism. The dead know nothing. When you're dead, you're flipping dead. When your body in the text is called a vessel, you will receive a perfected vessel in heaven and or perfected body. It directly says these things. So if life can be restored, and we already know life can be created through sex, and we've even manipulated that to the point, where we're making people pregnant who physically shouldn't be pregnant in that moment. We can do that too. And we've even done some cloning of some animals. I don't know which ones and to what extent. I don't care, but I know that we've done it. So I can say easily that if we perfected our cloning process, like we have done with, Dolly the sheep and a prize-winning bull and somebody else's dog and stuff, right? And it was worth our effort to do that because we value the human intrinsically in themselves. And that's the promise of what's to be done to the person who is, and you can get into a dispute about the morality of it, but okay. To the newborn clone who grows up with the memories of that person, the experiences of that person, you can say that in numerical identity, it's not the same person. But I could argue that the person exists because they're like in every way that person, even though they are not the exact same physical body. But then you aren't the exact same physical body right now as you were when I started talking. You've replaced cells. So what's the big deal about getting replaced?
So is this? Are you kind of leaning in towards like a reincarnation type of?
Yeah,
Is that?
yeah. It's literally talking about being born again. It's not an expression.
Right.
It means to you. I tell you now that to enter into the kingdom of God, you must be born again. Well, yeah, of course you do, because He's not a God of the dead. He's a God of the living.
But like, how many times does it take? Because it's not a generational thing. Each individual is the spiritual being, right? You're not merely an extension of the one that came before you.
A spiritual being. If by spirit you mean mind and your ideals and how your qualia and experience of reality, then yeah. If you mean like this ghosty thing that's somewhere but nowhere inside of you, I say no, that doesn't exist.
Okay, so you don't believe in what would I say, a spirit that is independent of the physical individual.
Yeah, the Bible doesn't believe that either, as far as I can tell. That's why it says you can die, and you're dead when you're dead. And by the way, while you're dead, you're not experiencing stuff because you're dead.
So when you come back, if you're born again, you would be born again as yourself.
Hey, look, we've got. I think it was John and a few others. B.S. Lewis is quoting the text. Should I get back in my mom's badge? Yeah, exactly. No, it's not. It's about being an ovum that's fertilized with exactly your genetics, and it starts making a you, like literally you. What'd you say, Kev? I'm sorry, I got distracted.
I'm asking if when you're born again, you would be born again as your identical self, not some other being.
Right, right. That's the idea, is to make the person again.
Okay. Because my understanding of reincarnation is that the spirit kind of transcends the body, and you could come back as any other any other thing with any other
Okay, well,
identity. But this is like a different kind of
that
idea.
that's an American view of a non-American religion, an Eastern religion that's kind of got co-opted into America. I don't know how it ever got popular, and it's just like, the American Buddhists will say it's not worship, it's a way of life. Do they not know that Buddha referred to God and was a theist? Do they not understand that? No, they don't, because they look into it half-assed. They don't really look into it. Buddhism is only talking about the mental aspects and acceptance of reality from within Hinduism. It's not a separate religion. Even though Americans like, oh, I don't like religion, so I'm going to be a Buddhist. Shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. Buddha was religious. So that's kind of co-opting some Eastern religious ideas into a society that doesn't understand it. And I'm not saying I fully understand it, but I can accept that much, that I didn't live there and I didn't grow up in that society, and I don't really get it, But I do see within Hinduism an expression of three, where one of them has no physicality and can travel anywhere at any time, and then you've got the younger one and the older one, and the younger and older one have the righteous claim to kingship. Both of them are princes or have the rightful heir to the throne, and the older one instructs the younger one, and the one who can fly anywhere and do magical stuff between them. It's the epic of Ramayana and his younger brother Lakshman, and the thing in between them that they share, which is Hanuman, the flying monkey god. So I see the Trinity in Hinduism plainly. It's just in the middle of the story where Christians want it all the way at the top of the story.
Okay, that's I've heard a lot of talk about this lately. What's your interpretation of the Trinity? What does that mean? Like, how should I be thinking about the Trinity? Is it three separate entities? This is the Elohim? Is this the description of...
I think what the text describes is the same thing that you have with your dad. Okay? You have personage and awareness. Your dad has personage and awareness. There is a connection between you and your dad, which both of you feel, and that connection is just as real as anything else you perceive. Sure, it's immaterial, but you understand it, and you both understand it in certain ways that you experience it. That's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost right there. Now, the three of you together are family. The two of you, and the relationship that develops in between the two of you. All of that is called family. That's how I view the Trinity.
Okay. So it literally means Father and Son, but what does Holy Spirit or Holy Ghost mean? What do you think that means?
It's the connection between them. It's their relationship.
Okay. So that's not that's not a separate thing. It's demonstrating.
Well, sure, it's a separate thing. You are not the relationship you have with someone. It's a separate thing.
Okay, I see what you mean there. Well, yeah, that sounds reasonable to think that there is some ghost floating about.
It's an old-fashioned way, and it's kind of a spooky-sounding way to put it. And a lot of it that we're subject to in this society right now is this presentism fallacy of modern Christianity, which is non-traditional. I'm telling you, the early Christians and the Orthodox Jews look at it just like I just described it. It's a family. That family is the God. It's the highest thing in that dynamic. It's the highest thing. It's what matters. It's what you're trying to maintain. It's necessary. It's a connection between you guys. And the entity that is the connection between you guys is this spiritual thing. It's not a physical thing. There is no physical dad-son relationship. You can't find, it doesn't weigh anything. You can't paint it. But it's real. We perceive it, and that's the dynamic of the Trinity, not what these modern Christians are saying at all.
Well, okay, but there is a physical connection between me and my father, right? Like my father
Sure.
actually, in a sense, created me with using his genetic material, right?
Yeah,
So
that's fine. That happens between the Father and the Son in the story too.
okay, that's kind of with the Mormon idea, right? That God is a physical being, and he came and impregnated Mary,
Can't
so
go to
that part
God
of,
with that. They're conflating the Father with God, which is a mistake. God is the set of constructs. It's the rules for the society. Like your dad says, I won't punch you if you don't punch me, and you sign up for that. Okay, Dad, you don't punch me, I won't punch you. It's all cool. We won't punch each other. That's God in the relationship, or one aspect of God. There'll be others. Like
do you
when
want
we
to
meet, we'll
respond?
shake hands. That could be God. What's that?
Do you want to respond to BS in the comments that I'm pretty sure it demonstrated that Trinity is idolatry uh, with the Bible?
To Richard with the Bible.
Yeah, I was
Yeah, the
paraphrasing.
modern I agree with BS. The modern conception of the Trinity is idolatry. It's worship of their church instead of reading what is in the Bible and not worshiping either the Bible. You're not supposed to worship the Bible either, but you're supposed to worship the relationship and what it's describing. Like it's like saying this computer is more important than Kevin, when I say the church or the Bible is more important than humanity and the God that humanity develops. The computer's not the point.
Well, I guess the problem for, again, conventional Christianity would be then you're discussing whether or not you're speaking of a monotheistic religion or a polytheistic religion or even a pantheistic religion, because if you believe there are three entities, then you can't have a singular ultimate being, right? Which kind of goes against their theology in
The,
the
the,
philosophical sense.
it goes against Christianity. The problem is it just doesn't go against the Bible, because the Bible is saying that what is God in the relationship between you and your actual dad is all of the immaterial constructs that you guys both accept, whether spoken or unspoken constructs. It doesn't much matter. That it is the highest thing in your relationship. That I have respect for my dad. My dad respects me as a son and now as an adult. And that respect right there, that's God in the relationship. The love, that's God. All these immaterial constructs that describe a relationship are the God. Now, they need to be true of the relationship. They can't be lies. It can't be like false respect. That's nothing that's ruling over the relationship. False respect can't do that.
So is this referring to what you were saying earlier as the God being the moral law or the moral code, right? And does that relate to the statements that says there is only one God? Like,
Yes, of course there's one
how
God.
would you
It's a
respond to
really
those statements?
expansive set. Look, I can say between you and your dad, there's a set. I don't know what that set is, but you definitely have a set. We only shake hands left-handed. That would be a part of the set. Or whatever you guys do. It doesn't even matter what you do. But it's whatever you two agreed upon. That's the set. There's only one set, because it's very proprietary between you and dad, right? Now that's not the same set that would be between you and your car, between you and your dog. It's not even the same set. That set wouldn't even apply. But that is the set that you and he maintain. Okay? And those are always going to be only immaterial constructs. And it's very specified. You guys have it like by the time a man is like in his 30s, he and his dad have it hammered out what their relationship is. It's very specific. It certainly includes certain things, and it certainly doesn't include certain things. Like it would be unusual if there was an unspoken rule or spoken rule within a relationship between dad and son that they share a sex partner. That would be really weird. Now, someone might have that rule. It's fine. But it'd be really unusual. Some people do. I'm okay with that. But I'm just saying that's an example of most man-son relationships would not include that rule. That one's out.
So, okay, wait. It's interesting to me that you brought in the car. So I was thinking, in the sense that I talk to my car, in the sense that I still sometimes talk to God, but I don't believe that my car is actually listening to me, right? I'm saying, hey, we're not going to run out of gas. I got you, or whatever. I'm sorry that I dinged that power pole or something, but it's more like an affirmation. I'm really just talking to myself. When I talk to my dad or even my dog, well, I don't have a dog, but other people's dogs. I used to have a dog. I know they are listening to me, whether or not they understand. Sure. English, I guess, is irrelevant. I believe most dogs do understand English pretty well, even if they can't speak it, just because they're so acclimated to humans. But the point is that I know the difference between the sentient and the non-sentient. Like at any time that I've talked to God, it seems to me that I'm merely speaking to myself. So I don't, sure. As far as prayer goes or any of that type of thing. So when you brought up the car, that made me think of that, and why we would still talk to like inanimate objects, or I'll talk to my guitar or something like that.
That's okay, but we're really just being cute. We're not super serious about it.
Right, but are we also, I guess, in a sense, kind of, it's that kind of idea of manifestation or the power of will. Like you're when you're self-affirming, right? You're kind of trying to manifest whatever is in your head into reality, right? Like the whole thing. Okay. I'm not going to run out of gas. I'm going to make it to the next gas station, So I'm gonna say it to the car. You know what I mean? That's kind of the
sure. Well, if I don't have someone else to make me feel good, I'm probably going to make myself feel good. So that's understandable.
And is it not the same in that sense when we talk to God, or we say, "Oh, well, I'm going to have a blessed day," or something like that?
It depends on what you're talking about exactly. I think that we can talk to other living beings, and they can respond in some way. I say to the dog, "Treat." Dog runs over to where the treat canister is. That's a response. If I say to the car, gas, it will not run to the gas station. It just won't. Or drive to the gas station by itself. It won't do that. Okay, so there's reasonable and there's unreasonable expectations. In the Christian, modern, New Agey conception of God, they think that they're talking to a being that created all of the universe. What the text is describing is the relationship between them and the person, the Father, and the person, the Father, might be willing to accept that the poor, ignorant dog doesn't understand. That the relationship between the owner and the dog is that the dog's not so very bright. And the dog might think the human is producing treats out of its ear. But that doesn't mean that's where the treats come from. And it's okay with the higher being that the lower being doesn't really get it. They don't hold it against the lower being. That would be prejudice and bad judgment. So the Father perfected in heaven. I don't think he'd care if you call him Buddha or Frankie, or I don't think it would much matter. But the claim is that being has personage and is sentient and understands us a lot better than we understand him.
Okay. I don't know if I'm derailing, but I was going back to the dog in the car analogy, and you know, in that sense, I have a relationship with my dog where if I, accidentally hit my dog with the door, I'm going to sincerely apologize. I'm going to sincerely feel bad, that I have harmed this sentient being. Whereas, like,
Sure.
with my car, if I wreck the car, let's say, I wreck the car. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna feel bad, but I'm gonna feel bad for myself. I'm not gonna feel bad for the
Right.
car, right?
Jeez,
Um,
and right before that date. I had to do that right before I go on a date? Really? I don't even have time to get the fender fixed.
so where does God lie in between that? Like, should I be thinking of God as being like a sentient physical creature like myself? If I do
I mean,
harm
you're
to
welcome
God,
to. You're welcome to that. Christians are welcome to that. I just don't think it can be justified in the Bible.
so we
The
can't harm
sentience
or
of a
offend
God.
God.
Of course not. God is unchanging. God doesn't have emotional states to change it. It's a societal set of immaterial constructs as a standard for running that society. It's nothing more, it's nothing less. It is the biggest thing, it's the most important thing. It's over top of every being and every relationship in that society. It is the highest thing. It does make demands and it does make commands and it does give rewards. Just like right now, as a citizen of the United States, I'm given some certain level of freedom in speech and action, but I can't just do anything. It's not everything is legal, especially where I'm infringing on someone else's property. I'm really not allowed to do that. So I, but if I'm willing to comply with the U.S. Constitution and I learn it well and I learn to use it well, I can be really successful in this society. And it guarantees me, it promises me certain things like the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, or the right to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. I'm guaranteed that. That's pretty cool. So it's made me promises. It's told me I can't do certain things. It's told me I have to interact in certain ways with the rest of the people here, and I accept that.
All right. So you mentioned constitutional reference there. Do you think that because the U.S. Constitution is based in some sense on biblical
No, it's
philosophy,
not. That's a lie.
you believe that's a lie?
I know it's a lie. That's a
Okay.
Christian. That's a modern Christian assertion.
Well,
Okay, consider Jefferson. Kind of big when it came to that, early Americana stuff, right? Like Thomas Jefferson. You know that he took the Bible and threw more than 90% of it away and printed the Jefferson Bible. Do you know the next to the last paragraph in the Bible says, "Hey, you ain't allowed to change this"? Do you really think he was a Christian?
well, I mean, I do believe that even the Jefferson Bible was the teachings of Jesus Christ, sans miracles and all that stuff, right? He just
Right.
he just made
It
Jesus into a moral character.
Yeah, it's the immaterial ideas to run a society part. That's all he
Right.
included, right?
So it's still
Which
just
is fine.
Jefferson's interpretation of
Yes, but
Christianity.
you
It
can't
doesn't mean
call him
he's
a
not a
you,
Christian.
dude. Really?
I mean, I don't believe that all of the founders were necessarily Christian, but I'm saying much of the Constitution is based on Christian philosophy.
It's
That
based on
whole
philosophy carried over from Europe, and a lot of that was based in Christianity. But it's not. You can't call it Christian based.
I I I think it was. I mean, it was the most
Well,
commonly, as it's still the most commonly adhered to religion of the people. So, I mean, that's going to be the standard for most of philosophy and philosophical thought in that sense, because they're starting from that same point. If most of them are raised in Christianity, then they're going to be starting from a Christian philosophical framework.
Yeah, I mean, it gets nuanced. I don't want to get off on that tangent too very far, but from what I understand to be true historically of the founding fathers of the United States, they were basically deists. They weren't Christians per se. And they might even identify themselves as philosophical Christians, which is not the same thing as thinking Jesus is God. And when the Christians say the founding fathers were Christians, they mean that they think that the founding fathers thought Jesus is God. I just don't think that's the case.
Yeah, or somebody had recently claimed that like the Constitution was based on the Ten Commandments or something. I'm like, where do you get that from? That's
Not
some
really.
total nonsense. But in a sense, I think a lot of that is cribbed from like John Locke, and John Locke was basing a lot of his moral stance from the Bible, and so that is where they get a lot of their argumentation from.
That would be
And once
fine, but
again,
you also have to say that they were Assyrian. If you're going to say they were biblical, Christians, then you also have to say they were Assyrian religious people, because the Stele of Hammurabi has the same ideas on it. So are they Assyrian religious? Is that what they were? Were they Zoroastrianists? Well, but no Christian would say that. But it goes back further than Judaism and Christianity and all the way into the ancient Near East to the Stele of Hammurabi, etc. So are they going to say, well, the United States is based on the Stele of Hammurabi? No, but it kind of is.
Yeah. But this still doesn't. Okay, so all these strike me again as just like human constructs. It doesn't lead me to believe that a god or gods exist.
I don't know
I
why
can
you
just
keep
say
saying
that
that.
people thought up God, or well, I mean,
I don't get
because
it, man.
it's going to be. Because I'm talking with you, Richard, but it's a little awkward. But that's what a lot of other Christians who might come in would tell
Well,
me.
first, I
If,
don't care what other
it's
Christians
like,
say, and for our conversation, it really doesn't matter what other Christians say, right? But
right. Why do I
look,
not just see? Okay, if I'm seeing these as a set of moral laws written by man, why the God story?
no,
Why
they're not
again?
written.
Why is it
That's not
important to
it.
call it God?
That's not it. They're not written by man. They're biological necessities of what a human being is. We are biologically whatever we are. And because we have the level of consciousness that we have and the minds that we have societies that are really complex. And then we have this invisible set of societal constructs. There are things like wisdom, knowledge, counsel, understanding, fear, power, and conservation, and all the repercussions of it to have a society. And what the Bible identifies as God is the highest thing over that society, the set of constructs, the heavenly constitution. So a person is welcome to say that, well, the Constitution's written down on a piece of paper, but there is no Constitution. And they're right. There is no physical thing, the Constitution. It's a set of concepts, right? And they might be annotated concepts, but the concepts themselves don't exist in any physical reality anywhere. Yet, they're the highest thing because the animal we are.
So God is a concept that is biologically necessary to humans. Is that
That's what I'm saying.
Did I break that down?
That is what I'm saying, yes. And that's biblically necessary and the only thing the Bible is describing.
Well, that's again, I can see that as reasonable. It's a pretty thick text for just describing that, I think. Like, it couldn't have been condensed.
Why do you say that's the only topic in the text?
Okay,
I
so
said
the rest
on the topic of God, I said all the commentary in the Bible on the topic of God is immaterial constructs and only immaterial constructs. It directly says things like God spirit, God love, God generosity, God kindness. It directly says in numerical identity.
All of these things, yeah.
Yeah,
it's identical to those things.
Yes, it's numerical identity. God love. That's the same thing.
But it also says that God is wrath, right?
Yes, that's one of the things, yeah.
So God is merely emotion and morality.
That wrath is not emotional.
You don't see wrath as emotional?
No, wrath is not necessarily emotional. Let me give you an example. A congress of chimpanzees. A snake shows up. Snakes will kill chimpanzees. So, before that happens, the chimpanzees have to kill the snake. But we see that at every level. Let an ant go into a beehive and see what happens. Does that mean because the bee must act in wrath and destroy that ant that the bee is emotionally provoked? No. We have to do certain things. We have emotions about it. But wrath is not necessarily emotional. It's just necessary.
Well, I would say that it is possible to. I mean, we can't necessarily measure the brain states of a bee, but I would say if we could,
Sure.
it would probably be similar to the human response. But the human's going to respond from an emotional basis.
No. You have emotional states about what you're doing and what you must necessarily do, or what you think you must do. It's not necessarily that the emotions cause the state of affairs.
Well, yeah, because we know, like, you can measure the direct response from the brain to body, right? Like, most people, if they, like, commit violence against another human, they're going to have to be highly adrenalized. There's going to be activity in certain parts of the brain that can be measured, right? If you don't have that, you're called a psychopath, right? So, or a sociopath, one or the other. If there's no emotional, like, adrenal activity going on, so you would have to have that, which we call it a heightened emotional response.
Sure. But what I'm talking about is wrath descriptive or prescriptive? Is it offensive or defensive? Is it aggressive or reactionary? That's what I'm talking about.
Well, I think wrath would have to be reactionary. It's like synonymous with
Well, then
vengeance.
it's a note. It got translated that way, and I'm sorry that the word wrath appears there. But what it's describing is we start killing the planet and start killing ourselves, and that gets to a point where it's unrecoverable. Like we cause climate change to the extent that it's gonna kill us, and we don't stop causing it until it's absolutely gonna kill us. And then they got to pull our butt out of the fire. Now, in order to pull our butt out of the fire, they have to show up, and that scares us. So you could say something like, well, it's immoral that they scared us. Hey, they didn't have a choice. We're killing ourselves. If they want to save us, they got to show up. So the wrath, per se, that's how it got translated, is reactionary. But we're the ones that caused it.
Okay, so you're saying it's the negative response of, or the negative outcomes of things that humans cause.
Right, like poisoning the planet with, Roundup.
Right.
It's a bad idea.
What do you think about a little side note there, Monsanto? Do you have any thoughts on that? Somebody asked me
It's
about
a corporation trying to make money. That's
okay,
what I
but
think.
are they evil? Definitionally,
there's things that are bad for humans, and to the human, that's evil. So there's evil in that way. Is there like universal evil? I don't think so. Is what big corporations doing, sacrificing the health and welfare of the greater population and the biology, the biodome that is this earth, is that an evil thing to do? Well, it's bad for humans, so yeah, it's literally evil.
what do you think about a concept like the New World Order? There's a lot of Christians that would talk about that.
I'm not sure what that means, or that I've cared enough to look into it very deeply.
Loosely, it's a conspiracy theory based in Revelations it says that basically there will be a one world government run by large corporations, essentially, because they
Oh,
hold the
oh,
purse
bad
strings,
idea.
and that there's some direct correlation to this in the Book of Revelation, where the government will be issuing the mark of the beast. Some say it's the
Yeah, yeah.
vaccines and things like that.
Oh my God,
Um,
Kev, all this is so freaking twisted. I don't even know where to start. Okay, if the signs of end times actually happen to the planet, there's a few things you wouldn't have anymore, like running water and electricity, because you wouldn't have people enough to run power plants, right? That would be a thing of the past. And why? Well, because power plants tend to be really big structures that aren't built for real serious earthquakes. They're just not built to handle that. So you have crumpling power plants and cracked dams and lakes emptying out and stuff. So no more power. How are you going to read an RFID chip?
yeah, well, that would be the first problem, right? Unless they were the only ones who had something resistant to what EMPs or something, right?
It doesn't even matter if there are EMPs or not. If you can't look, you need to have solar panels, right? Because infrastructural electrical sources are now toast, right? And you need to not have an EMP that broke that too. And that's part of the prophecy as far as I read it. You're pretty much left with just chaos. Chaos. You you wouldn't have infrastructure and governance and things like that. And what the text, I believe, is talking about, which, oh my God, it gets crazy trying to explain away all the Christian assertions, and I'm not even going to try. But what I understand it to be talking about is in the second half, or in the 3.5 years of end times, because it's 7 years total, you have Jesus and the apostles and the army of 144,000, the disciples, and they go around trying to convince everybody to go to heaven. That is, except the alien spaceships. It's going to be okay. They're not here to eat us. That's their message. Don't worry about it. They're not here to eat you. Geez, Hollywood movie already. Just freaking ridiculous. But anyway, so they're going. That's the second half. That's when the rise of the beast and the new government happens. Why? Well, because you just had an alien invasion. The old government is gone. I mean, completely friggin' gone. But the guy who's like tells the best story at that time, talking about the restoration of the planet, can seriously say things like, "Hey, Kev, you know what? You're a smart dude, man. Like, I'm really impressed by. Would you run France for me?" And can
And
seriously
he's just
say
going to
that
appoint me
and mean
Lord of
it.
France. That'd be good.
Just make you king of France. Sure, why not? I like you, Kevin. How would you like to be king of France? Would you prefer like all of Europe, or I mean, do you like South America? Because something could be arranged where you're king of South America. If that sounds cool
Is
to
that
you.
like sound decision making? He's going to make me ruler
Doesn't
of like a
matter.
whole.
It doesn't matter.
Like,
He'll be
does he know
promising
anything
things like
about
that to
me?
people. It doesn't matter. What I'm saying is that one guy with the best story who will be put in charge because they got nothing better and his plan is to save the earth. That's the new world order, not Trump
Oh,
and
yeah.
RFID chips and crap.
So is that like the Antichrist in the Bible?
Precisely. Yes.
He can't speak French. It's
I love Casey.
very true.
Yeah.
Uh,
You could have an interpreter. There'll be somebody around who can speak both languages. It'll be fine.
I was trying to think of whether I knew any like French words to try to say horribly, but I can't think of oui oui. No.
I know a couple of them.
Give us your
Yeah,
best.
I
What's,
failed French
no.
in 8th grade. I failed French in 8th grade. I know quite a few French words. Like to say to an adult male in a respectful public greeting, Monsieur. That's French. Monsieur. To say something like aloha, or I hope things go well for you, or have a good trip. Bonjour. right?
Bonjour. Yeah. Okay. I should have known that one.
Bon as in good and jour as in journey. So good journey. Bonjour.
And then there's a soup, right? Au jus. That's French, right?
Au jus is
Yeah.
a dipping sauce for sandwiches. Yeah.
Sauce. Yeah. Okay. What's
Yeah.
up, Lady Avon? Casey and Randy.
Peace and respect, Lady Avon.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is I don't give a crap what modern Christians say in their presentism fallacy and their assertions about what and who God is, because the Bible doesn't even describe God as having a who. There is no who God. There's no consciousness God. And it's heaven's idea of like the same as our Constitution, Bill of Rights, and all the amendments and all that stuff. That's what it is.
Well, okay. I find it very difficult to disagree with you. Like,
I mean, I can literally show it throughout the text and consistently, and it never makes a different assertion than what I just said. It never does.
other than I would say it's very problematic that so many people have interpreted this in such a way that it can be harmful, right? Like religion,
And they have made life
still
worse.
harms people.
How could a true belief in something that's true in reality make life worse? It wouldn't. It would make life better. So they're obviously wrong against reality, which is why it causes suffering. Because they won't agree with the reality.
So how do you think? What do you think is the most effective way to persuade religious people to
To
accept?
give up this crap?
Yeah, to accept
Well, first they
your
could
line of
start by
speech.
studying classical logic. That would be a good start. Like, how do you know if something's true? They could study what the idea of epistemology is. How they know something's true. You know, they could start to comport with the reality that we see at hand and stop like having magical thinking. Lady Avon, I don't think any version, by that word version right there, you mean translation. I think a translation is exactly that, a translation. It can't be trusted. It was somebody's opinion about what was meant. But the right thing to do is go talk to a rabbi or a natural Hebrew speaking person and ask them what the text is about. Of course, I do that through Jacinius and Strong's and a local rabbi when I can get a hold of him. So we have the definitions and ideas, and we can look into the Hebrew culture and say, what does this phrase right here mean to the Hebrews? I'll give you an example. The word bosom in Abraham is in the bosom of God. If you don't know the Hebrew idioms, the word bosom right there is actually pocket, and that word pocket refers to, like much of the Hebrew language, refers to the human body. It's actually the pocket of your nose, which means nostril. So if you took a direct translation, you would read that Abraham was in the nostril of God. You see, so you need to know those background things to understand what it means. Now, bosom is just fine because people put pockets in their robes in a place that they could guard it against thieves, so that you could wrap your arms around the pocket, right? That way thieves couldn't get your crap, because thievery was, popular back then. So it makes sense to write it, and that's good understanding of a Hebrew idiom instead of writing Abraham was in his nostril.
Yeah, the reference to the nostril just makes me like, did people used to like hide small items in their nose? I mean,
Don't know.
There is
No,
kind
but
of a pocket there.
a lot of the Hebrew language is based on the physical human body, like the letter yod, which makes the J or Y sound. That yod, that's a human hand. It's a simple ink mark, painted, brush mark, which represents the natural curvature of the human hand, which is why the yod looks like a hand from the wrist up. That's why it is a hand. And what does that word hand, that idea, that letter hand right there mean? Well, the yod in and of itself means the hand of power or ability. It means strength and ability. And it's the open hand of power, meaning it's not closed in a fist. It's not being aggressive. It's not trying to hurt you. It's trying to extend a hand of grace and strength and power to help you. And all that's in just the letter Yod.
Okay. I want to address Lady Avon here in the side chat, because you reference the Bible often. Which translation do you rely on? And then Ox is answering for you here, but you're making a new translation. Is that correct? You're still working on the.
I'm at Genesis 18 something.
Right. So you're using various translations as you're studying the language, right?
There's one translation I will not use, and that's the Vaticanus. I will not use Vaticanus because it has Catholicism already written into it presuppositionally. But I will use Greeks. The Gesenius, the Strong's, the Greek lexicon, the Masoretic text, the Hebrew understanding, and all that stuff I'll use.
So you're rejecting certain Latin translations, is what you're rejecting, Vaticanus, right?
Well, here's why. The Latin and Greek translations refer back to early Christian religion. So, yes, it can be written in Greek or Latin, that's fine, but it doesn't use Greek and Latin idioms and ideas because it's not Greek religion. Obviously, it's Christianity. Like, where's Zeus in the New Testament? He's not there. That's because it's not their native religion. You're not going to find, Hermes, for instance, in the New Testament. So it's still referring back to early Christianity and late Judaism. So you have to adopt that mindset in order to understand it, even from the Greek. Now the Vaticanus is flat straight the hell out. It can't be taken seriously because it was like commissioned by a pope and written down by cardinals, and it was their understanding within the Catholic Church specifically, which is the same reason I don't use the NIV. It's for that same reason. I don't use the ESV. I don't use the King James. You can't use them. They're good as an index card, a glossary. It's all they're good for is a glossary. But I really want to go smoke a cigarette. I'm getting more and more hyper.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm gonna probably wrap it up as we're going on 2 hours here, and as I said, I don't think there's really too much to disagree about. I was gonna say I think the King James version, maybe by moral standard, by my moral standard, I don't know about yours, probably the worst translation of the text. Do you think so? Yeah.
Probably. It's horrible. It's really. I mean, it was for King James. It was for their society. It's written in late Middle English, which means most of the key words that you think mean a certain thing probably don't. Because the reason we call it Middle English is because it's not modern English. Like, for instance, I'll give you a quick example. I'm going to go smoke. The word curse in the Middle English means to make a promise. There is no negative or positive connotation. But when the Christian reads, "and God cursed," they read that God unblessed them. But right. What it actually is saying is God promised them. They don't understand that.
Yeah, that's a big difference. That's a big discrepancy. It's not minor.
Right. It's a verbal contract that's being made. It's not that God punished them. That's not it. He actually agreed to something. Well, that's not the same thing at all. Thanks for can I mirror this later?
Absolutely, okay? Absolutely, yeah. Do you have anything to shill before you go, or?
Yes, I'd like to shill something. I love you all, and I look forward to the day we're all great friends. And thanks for the time, Kev.
Thanks for coming by. I appreciate you, man. Every Monday. Let's talk to you later.
Every Mondays you're doing this. Okay, cool.
I'm gonna do this every Monday.
I'll come bug. I'll give you a break in between, but I'll come by bug you sometime.
All right, sounds good, brother. All right. Well, great conversation as always with Richard. To any other theists who want to come by, next week is going to be open for theists as well as atheists. We have some back and forth, respectful dialogue. We're not going to have any dumpster fires over here. Hopefully, I can handle the moderation. But yeah, I'm going to do these open rooms Mondays, 9 a.m. Pacific time. We'll do open room religion, open room anybody. And then at the end of the month, we'll kind of have like a calm down where it's an open room, but we're not going to talk about religion or politics or any of this stuff. So that's the way we're handling this. And then we'll have an atheist open room where we can, talk a bunch of crap because that's what we atheists love to do. That's all we do. Just talk crap about religion. No, I think we could find other things to talk about. And that's the idea. But while we're here, we can talk about religion a couple times a month. Peace, Ox. Very good to see everybody in the side chat. Got Ox, Lady Avon, KCA Randy, BS Lewis, Doc Fearsome. Who am I missing? I know. Look at the trees. Nadimos. Richard Madsen, of course, was my guest today. But this will be open for all theists to come by at later dates and atheists as well. I had to reschedule with Atheist Mo again, so we'll get that day out. We got our AMs and our PMs flip-flopped, so oops. That's the problem with scheduling at noon or midnight or whatever time it is, and he's East Coast and I'm West Coast, so we'll work it out. Many scheduling conflicts. New videos up on Patreon. Go check it out if you can. For as little as $1 a month, you get all the Patreon content. If you want to donate more, you can get stickers and cool prints and stuff like that. I'm going to work on putting up more prints. What am I looking for? Oh, yes. The banner. Thanks to supporters and people who show the show. Liking and subscribing and all that jazz. You know how YouTube works over here. And it's been fun. It's been real. Much love to everyone. I'm going to go get ready for my Twitch stream. I'll be streaming on Twitch shortly, probably about noontime. I'll go get some breakfast first. Be well. Stay trusty. Much love. And 150. I was trying to drag it out to the actual 2-hour mark, but you know what? Yeah, keep it real, homies.
Keep it real, homies.